Hey everyone, we are back with a new season of More Layers. Once again, I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith.
Yeah, we've been gone for a while, for maybe like 2, 3 months, working on the new Artists Unlimited production, our first live show in a couple years, Lion King Jr. Yeah, yeah. Last year we weren't really, because of the COVID situation, we weren't really able to do a show live. Well, some of us got to do some virtual performances, but we haven't really done anything live since Shrek the Musical until this past show, like last week, The Lion King Jr. at Greece Central Performing Arts Center. They figured out a way to make it work. They got nicely creative. They split us up into two separate casts for COVID safety. I was in one, Jordan was in the other, and we had masks on the whole time, and yeah, we did regular health screening and careful protocol in accordance with 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 the guidelines of COVID, and I think it was a big success, very well received show, and it was good to connect with old friends and make some cool new ones, and it was a very good time.
Absolutely. And I like the kind of mask that they gave us because there was a little like air space, I guess, for the lack of a better term, where our mouth is so that it wasn't pressing right up against our mouth and we could sing a little bit easier. So I did like those. And our cast is normally roughly 80 something people. And chances are, even with a wide open stage, that's probably not the best thing to do in a situation like this. So, like Seth said, they split us up, and Seth and I happen to be in separate casts. But as far as I know, we both went to see the other cast's performance.
Yeah, we did see each other. Yeah, and at a couple points we actually practiced a little bit together too. We practiced the climactic finale scene.
Yeah, because Seth in his cast he played Scar, and I played in my cast the adult version of Simba. So when their Simba wasn't there for rehearsals, they had me step in. So we at least got to perform a little bit together, even though it wasn't in front of an audience. But it was still fun while we were able to. And I do got to give props to Artists Unlimited because this was the first theatrical production I have done, not counting the Zoom stuff. Actually, hold on. When did we do the Zoom version of Aladdin?
It was, I think, sometime in 2020, like maybe mid 2020 or late.
Okay, so technically that was the first theatrical production I did without my father, because for those who don't know, my father passed in October of last year, and I think we had done it around the same time because I think I had to take a week just to let things settle in, and then this was my first full blown on stage production without my dad. And go figure, I play a character who loses his dad. They were very patient with me, and they even in our programs, which were also digital, because normally we have like a physical booklet that people can open. But this year, what they did was they had a QR code. You scan that, and you can see it digitally that way. They put in a picture of my dad and threw in like a little in loving memory thing for him because he was involved with the show. But of course, now he can't be, so they took the time to pay him respect, and I am very grateful for it.
Yeah. And if you want to, anybody out there, if you want to see the digital program, but you don't have the pamphlet or whatever you call it, you can see it as far as I know, you can read it on our website or the Artists Unlimited website, I mean, rockartistunlimited.com. Yeah. And so, you know, since we've been off from this show, I was thinking about how we've been kind of lagging in terms of audience or audience engagement. So I thought it would help if maybe we more strategically structured our episodes, gave it a more specific format, and broadened our topics. And so, starting with this episode, what we're going to do, the big thing we're going to do is discuss a broader, kind of general topic. And I've written down a few questions for us to discuss, sort of like a round table thing, a little table talk sort of thing. Our big topic of this episode is movies based on true stories, which is something that seems to be more or less exploding in this day and age. We've seen, you know, with the releases of films like A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood and Judy, and there's a new Kurt Warner biopic coming out called American Underdog.
Rocket Man.
Right? Bohemian Rhapsody, The Founder. So, the first question I wrote down was, how do you make a good film based on a true story? And do you want to go first, or should I?
I'll go. So what I ended up saying, at least in direct response to that question, was, of course, you want to make sure the story you're telling is actually true. Like, and
Right.
additionally, you want to make sure it is at least mostly accurate to the source material. Like, I know a lot of people, maybe not personally, but I've seen a lot of people when they are watching a film that's based on real events, if it's not at least for the majority accurate to the source material it is based on, then they start to get upset. A good example of a film that kind of does this is Prince of Egypt. Like, Prince of Egypt, they open with a little message at the beginning that I like, where they pretty much say, "Hey, this movie is not 100% accurate, but we tried our best to stay true to the main plot points of the story." Like, they got the whole slavery thing and how Moses delivers them out of Egypt, and it leads right up until the Ten Commandments, which is where the movie ends, where he walks down the mountain with them in hand. But they did put their own little spin on it and focused on uh, what Moses and Ramesses' relationship could have been like if they thought of themselves as brothers. So yeah, they still stayed true to the story, but they put their own little spins on there while still remaining faithful. One tidbit that I thought I'd brought up, I would like to bring up anyway, is
Sure.
a clip I found that somebody had talked about, the nostalgia critic who's known for comedically reviewing different movies. Every year he does a series where he looks at commercials. And one that stood out that I remember him talking about uh, was a trailer of sorts, more like a little promotional ad for a Ninja Turtles cassette tape. I don't remember if it was for the 80s or 90s. But what was interesting about this ad, we know that the Ninja Turtles are fictional characters, but you still might be able to find this ad where the narrator talking about the video, he actually says, and I quote, "based on the incredible true story." We know the Ninja Turtles are not real, so this is not a true story that this movie could be based on, and yet somehow he says it is a true story.
Oh, now that's weird.
Yeah, you actually might be able to find it. I don't remember what the video itself was called, but I'm sure if you just type in Ninja Turtles true story ad or something, you might be able to find it.
All right. Well, in response to the same question, how to make a good film based on a true story, all right, there was really one, I guess the word is criterion, that I talked about when I wrote my response down. I said the best ones, like any screen project, show everyone's side of the story. And probably the reason why I think that's a particularly important thing is because, in a sense, pretty much all the characters are people with feelings, with limits, and, they're not just completely angels or monsters. They may be more wrong than right or more right than wrong, but still.
True, yeah.
Yeah. And I went on to say, in response to what are some true story movies you think were good, I listed a few specific titles. I guess I'll start with a more famous example, The Founder, which is based on the story of the beginning of McDonald's. You know?
Okay. So was
Yeah,
that
and
more like was it a documentary movie or was it kind of a retelling from the perspective of the people who originally made it?
more like a retelling that was. I think it was more focused on the guy who took over this little restaurant from these two brothers, Ray Kroc, who ended up turning this little restaurant into this big nationwide and eventually worldwide chain. It mostly follows him and his efforts to turn this little business into a huge business machine all over America. He thinks, I think, man, this is so great, this is so inventive, it should be all over America, and he tries to sell these two brothers, Richard and Maurice McDonald, on the idea of franchising it. Overall, when you watch this, you probably are thinking, man, this guy is so stubborn and selfish, he won't let up. Uh, but you can understand Ray Kroc's wanting to make this bigger than it already is and make it accessible to more people and maybe understand his suggestions for making things better, making things more economic, or but at the same time, the McDonald brothers are very protective of what they have or of their restaurant as it is. They want to pretty much keep things manageable and keep things more authentic, and they fear that franchising will compromise that. So there's that tension that kind of runs throughout, and there are two sides that you can understand, I think.
Okay.
So that was one example, and then I put not as famous an example, but nonetheless a pretty strong film. It's a biopic of the Christian recording artist, the late Rich Mullins, titled Ragamuffin. And a big part of the story is his struggles throughout his adult life with mental health and alcohol and and self-loathing, I guess, and faith. And it seems to be primarily because of the emotional abuse his dad treated him with. Maybe it wasn't his intention to, but that's how it made him feel anyway. There's an early scene, takes place during Rich's childhood. His two parents are talking about, how his dad is talking to him, how he's getting all mad about Rich messing things up. And the mom says to the dad, I think you're too tough on him. He said he was sorry. Hey, and Dad's pretty much like, well, sorry doesn't pay the bills. And then the other one I thought of was a Hallmark film based on the story of a teacher in Georgia who grew up dealing with a disability called Tourette's syndrome. So this guy, and the movie's called Front of the Class, and it follows Brad Cohen, dealing with people getting upset, some people making fun of him because of his physical and vocal tics that are pretty much the effects of this condition, Tourette's. And while most of the time, when I think about the plot or when I was watching it, I definitely, probably because I've been in a similar situation and growing up with autism, I felt bad for Brad because it was pretty clear he wasn't looking for trouble, but people were getting upset with him all the time and accusing him. But at the same time, you know, to be fair, very few people, if any, knew that this condition actually existed. So
Sounds
yeah,
really intriguing. I might actually be checking this out in the near future. I've actually known over the course of my life at least one or two people that have had Tourette's. So I've seen it in person, and I feel like even if I hadn't seen anybody like that before, watching this movie would allow me to better understand it.
yeah, you could argue that like 90% of it is coming from Brad's own point of view and how how people's reactions to it made him feel. But like I said, it's not entirely one-sided.
Right.
Yeah, did you think of some examples other than Prince of Egypt? To answer that last one.
Yeah. Some true stories I think were good. I did list Joseph King of Dreams, which was the story of Joseph in the Bible that was made by the same people who did Prince of Egypt, but three more that I wrote down that I thought were good, or at least I'm sure are, which I'll get to in a second. The first one is The King's Speech. This was one that I had to watch for one of my classes in college, and I think it centered around, or at least was based on King Henry the Sixth or something like that.
I think his name was George.
Was it George? I
I think
had
I think so.
I was researching this ahead of time, and for some reason I didn't write this stuff down. But it was one of those guys, uh, and they had not necessarily stage fright, but it's something that a lot of people have when they go up to speak in front of people. They get
I
very
think what he had was a stutter. I think it was a stutter was the thing he was coping with.
Yeah, I think it was that combined with just speaking in front of people. He had that issue and he was getting very frustrated with it. So he started taking these lessons from a guy. And at first he was kind of reluctant because he felt like he wasn't making much progress. But then one tactic that the guy used that made him ultimately come back and try again was where he had him speak, but he had coverings over his ears so he couldn't hear himself talk. And then when he played it back later, he realized he was speaking very clearly. So he came back to this guy, and eventually he was able to overcome these issues. I think a lot of people should see it, and then because it also, in general, shows different tactics people can use to speak clearer or to get over the whole stage fright type of thing.
Or speech anxiety.
Right. That's probably a better way to put it.
Yeah.
I think there were one or two scenes in there that were a little questionable
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what they were saying, but other than that, I'd say it's pretty much for anybody to see. So after that, I wrote down The Sound of Music. I enjoy the story, and I know they probably didn't sing the way that they did in the film, but it's still a very interesting perspective. Uh, the only difference in the actual story, at least the one that everyone points out, is the way they escaped at the end. Because I believe In the movie, it portrays them as kind of just walking away and then going through these mountains, whereas in real life, I believe they got away by taking a train. But it's still a good story that I think a lot of people check out, whether they're a fan of history or they just like musicals in general. It's still a good one for people to really look into. And the last one I listed, I actually haven't seen, but I remember when it first came out, a lot of people were talking about it, and it's called American Sniper. And I can't remember the name of the guy that it's based on, which again I totally should have written down and I didn't. But it is based on a guy who racked up a lot of kills as an American sniper during at least one or two wars. Like he had an incredible track record, and it was based on a real person. And I also wanted to kind of point this one out because despite the fact that it came out around 7 or 8 years ago, I looked this up, and apparently there's still one local theater, at least around where we are, that still shows it.
Some other thing that I wrote down as a question is, should these sorts of movies not be made while the subjects are still alive? And um, I believe the movie that particularly inspired me to write that question was the aforementioned Rocket Man, the biopic of Elton John. It's based on, what I heard Sky Jatani, who's a host of the movie Proposal, which is a big inspiration for me to make this show, and based on what I remember from seeing the movie myself in the theater, is that the story was pretty much, it felt like the story of like all the problems Elton John experienced and all the things he went through were the faults of others and not at all his own ever.
Right.
Yeah, well, I do feel like it was, this may sound harsh, but this is, I think, how I feel. Conveniently biased, I would probably describe it as. Like, conveniently biased or one sided. Yeah, I'm sure maybe a lot of it was maybe other people's fault, but he must have done some stupid stuff himself as well.
Honestly, I'd be very surprised if he didn't, because a lot of celebrities they'll make choices that they eventually will regret or will realize that they shouldn't have done or something. But like nobody's career is going to have a perfect track record. I'm pretty sure of that. And the
Mhm.
way I answered this question, I was saying that I personally think that it can be done. However, if they're going to make a movie while the person is still alive, the person it is based on should typically be consulted pretty much every step of the way, if for no other reason to make sure they are saying and doing, or to make sure what they are saying and doing is at least mostly accurate. But like you're saying, it shouldn't be just told from that person's perspective. It should have other people that were involved in the story consulted while this movie's being made as well, so you get more than one side of the story so that it's more fleshed out and hopefully as a result told more accurately and through a more realistic lens.
Yeah, probably the big mistake that Rocket Man made was, well, it may have showed how some events and stuff affected Elton. Well, we never really, I don't think we can ever really see in the movie how stuff affected the other people in his life, like the woman he was married to, or people in his family, or friends, people he worked with. I don't think we ever got to see, any of us who saw it ever got to see how he or something might have affected them, you know?
Yeah. And Rocket Man, it was a retelling from his perspective, right? Like his life.
At least it felt like it.
I personally think a film like that, if it's pretty much going to be an autobiography in movie form, it should have been done more so in the style of a documentary. Because usually, when they make a documentary series or a documentary movie based on somebody who existed or still does in some cases, then usually those kinds of films are told from more than one perspective, or they just give you a timeline of events that happened and why. So if
And,
Rocket Man had been done in more of a style of a documentary, then maybe it would have been told in a more realistic light.
and the next thing I wrote was, what are some true story movies that have come out that you think you might want to watch that you have not yet? And I wrote a bunch of them, and a few of them are coming. They haven't come out yet. But I'm gonna start with the ones that have come out that I have not seen. And the first one I put down was Bombshell. Did you hear that one?
I feel like I've heard the name at some point.
So that's based on the story of the harassment scandal at Fox News Channel.
Oh yeah, I remember
Yeah,
hearing about those events. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
People in power, they seem to be getting away with crap like harassment and things like that, and not really paying sufficient consequences or being sufficiently confronted for it, or being excused maybe even for it.
Like
yeah.
harassment is something that shouldn't be tolerated. In fact, this makes me think of, I want to say it was the Today Show where the guy,
Matt Lauer?
yeah, where he was apparently harassing people behind the scenes and it didn't come out into the public eye until quite a while later.
Yeah, that's another good example. I also wrote down the recent Tanya Harding biopic called I, Tanya. Harding is infamous for being accused of setting up a plot against fellow figure skater Nancy Kerrigan, like something like 25 years ago or something. Apparently some guy took some club thing, whacked Kerrigan in the knee, forcing her out of skating for a while. And Harding was accused of setting that up or something, and she was never allowed to skate again. ABC News did something kind of focused on that, and they interviewed Harding. They discussed on the segment about her growing up, being held up to conservative woman, feminine standards, how she was contrasted to Kerrigan, who was perceived as a sort of goody goody girly girl, and she may have resented that. And then the attack happened, and she was blamed for it and never allowed to skate again. And so, just hearing about how she was apparently treated, that was enough to make me mad.
Oh, absolutely, understandably so.
Then I put down the recent biopic of Judy Garland, simply titled Judy, starring Renee Zellweger. Watch Mojo did I know sometimes they do, or either them or the sister channel Ms. Mojo, maybe both of them do this. They do lengthy, like 20-minute or something videos on like the life and career story of this or that Hollywood icon who's come and gone or whatever. And they did one on Judy Garland, and even the beginning of the story seems, in a way, tragic or foreshadowing of tragedy. I say that because apparently, after she was conceived, her parents wanted to abort her, but the law was against it, and so they didn't go through with it or whatever, and they had her anyway. So apparently, they didn't even want her.
Ouch.
I remember them mentioning when she was working on Wizard of Oz, which was probably her most famous credit. She was obligated to take drugs just to keep her energy up or whatever, or get a good night's sleep every night. It was like she was being exploited or something.
Well, I definitely hadn't heard these details before. I had heard that she had been having issues up to that point, but I don't know if I ever actually heard specifics.
And then I put down, I think it was an Amazon original, Elvis and Nixon. It stars Kevin Spacey and Michael Shannon, and it follows the true story of the time that Elvis Presley and then President Richard Nixon, I think it was in the 1970s, met at the White House, and Elvis showed up there unannounced, saying that he wanted to get a narcotics badge and be able to work undercover as a federal agent and help America fight against communist influence. And Nixon, upon being informed about Elvis showing up, he pretty much decides, hey, if people find out that I've spent time with Elvis, well, more people will want to vote for me for re-election. The movie Proposal did an episode about this and talk about some of the details, and I watched the trailer and thought, this might be interesting. And then I said Quiz Show, which is, I guess, something of a cult classic. It's a film from the 90s based on the scandal of, I think it was a quiz show in the 50s called 21, in which contestants um, were given trivia questions, alternating questions. They wouldn't know how their opponent was doing. They'd be in isolation booths, and they'd only be able to hear the host. And so they had these headsets on, and it turned out that behind the scenes, while these games were going on, producers were actually fixing the games. Like they were telling certain players, what's the correct answer, when to answer correctly, when to miss, and apparently that was their way of trying to keep the games more exciting and more competitive, more exciting for the people watching. Eventually, Congress gets involved, and there's this sort of debate in the government about should this be more regulated? And there's a clip one person says, as well, he says something like, this isn't a public entity, this is entertainment. It doesn't really need that. And so there's that balance of two sides like I talked about, and so I thought that might be a good one.
And it's definitely interesting because I know there have been a lot of game show scandals or something being fixed or players even cheating in some fashion, but I don't think I've ever heard it being done to that extreme. I know, actually, I don't know if I can name too many examples of certain game shows or quiz shows with things being completely fixated. Boy, I remember there was one game show. I think it was called something like $1 Million Drop or something, which
$1 Million Money Drop, yeah. I believe that was the one. I don't know if I would call that a fix if you were about to say that, but just a simple error on the researchers.
yeah, it was one of those infamous game show moments because it was a quiz show of sorts where you kind of bet money on what you thought an answer would have been, like which one was the right answer. And then it turned out, I forget who the couple was, but they put the money on a certain answer that was right, but the show said it was wrong. And the reason why people were upset was how the show responded. Because many people thought they should have just gotten the prize money for being wronged on a scale like that, but all they did was just allow them to try again.
Yep, and then I wrote down a few that are coming in the new year. Um, in the year 2022, to be clear. Yep, and so the first one is one called Blonde, which is about Marilyn Monroe. And as I talked about, when we were talking about, I think this was during the time we were talking about celebrity voiceovers, I mentioned, we talked a little bit about typecasting and the danger of that. And, right, remember?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah. And so, I mentioned a little bit about how, Monroe was the story went that she was typecast as these sort of perky, peppy, maybe not very bright, I guess, blonde characters. And she liked it for a while and then grew to resent it. And then for some reason she took one too many pills and died young.
Right. Yeah.
And that combined with the fact that she used a stage name instead of her real name, and her whole claim to fame was being sexual on screen and in performances was and and how she was apparently more complicated than that and probably not liking that very much makes me think I might want to see it. I also said there's another one coming out about Elvis Presley, simply titled Elvis, and just simply because things I've heard about him, how controversial a figure as he was, while I guess at the same time he was a superstar and people loved what he did, and how now to some degree he had a sort of troubled life, and so I picked that one.
Okay. Yeah. That would definitely be intriguing to see.
And then there was I Want to Dance with Somebody, which as you might have guessed, that's one about Whitney Houston. I don't know much about her story, but I've gotten I feel like I've gotten implications that mentally she was a mess throughout her career and had problems with drugs and people attacked her for personal choices she made, and I guess I would like to somewhat better understand her story.
Sure. Yeah. I definitely can get behind that.
And then the last one I put was Reagan, about the legendary president Ronald Reagan, who was president for most of the 80s. I think this is probably because he had a reputation for being a guy of deep faith and somebody who was admired at least by most Republicans, and he was, I guess, something of an icon as a president. I guess might be my reasoning there for that one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you put down any true story movies you thought you might want to watch that you haven't yet?
Yeah. I wrote down a small handful here. One was, I think this already came out some years ago now. Hidden Figures.
I have seen a little bit of that.
Okay, so you know what the movie is.
It's like I think this is like NASA during the civil rights era.
This film covers three different women that were working at NASA during the 1960s.
Yeah, I think this was during that whole segregation thing.
Yeah, and I figured I'd watch it because it tells a story you wouldn't have been able to see probably in the 60s. Um, and I also would love to see stories anyway of what goes on behind the scenes during these different space missions.
Like, did you see Apollo 13?
That was another one that I wrote down because I actually have seen snippets of it, but I never saw it all the way through. So I figured at some point I got to sit down and just watch it from beginning to end.
Yeah. All right. What else?
I wrote down one called 127 Hours, which is a movie where James Franco portrays a hiker who got stuck under a boulder for 5 whole days.
Yeah. When it's 5 continuous days, it must feel longer.
Especially since you can't really go very far. You have very limited supplies at that point. So some survival movies like that intrigue me, so I figured write that down and maybe I'll take a look at some point. And then the last one I wrote down, I think I might have seen a good chunk of this at some point, or at least one that told a very similar story, called The Theory of Everything, which is a memoir by Jane Wilde that kind of covers the life of Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, Jane was his wife, and I saw that movie. Eddie Redmayne played Hawking.
Okay, so you at least know a little bit about it. That's cool. I
Uh,
remember a clip somewhere of where he was first learning to speak using a computer. But I don't remember if
Well,
it was in that movie or a different one.
because his body was getting more and more crippled as he was suffering from ALS.
Right, yeah. And at one point he could barely even move.
And then the last question I wrote was, what true stories that haven't been told in film should be? And I came up with a bunch of them, but do you want to share yours first?
Well, the interesting thing is I didn't write down any specific examples, and what I actually said was it was tricky to think of as I don't always know what has been made into a movie already and what hasn't. One movie idea though that I would love to see sometimes done is a sort of documentary film that covers the making of another movie or movie series. Some movies already have behind the scenes features attached to their film that you can watch at any time, but I would like to honestly see more feature length versions of this kind of thing.
I think there have been stuff like that, like on the biography channel, and there's a there are Netflix shows like the movies that made us, and probably other stuff out there.
Okay, and I think I want to say Disney Plus has something along that line. I just don't remember the name.
Like I know they have an original series on Disney Plus about park attractions called Behind the Attraction.
I think that might have been what I was thinking about.
And so was that all you said?
Yeah, that was all I said because at the time of writing these notes down, I couldn't think of any specific examples, but I figured this is the kind of film that I would really love to see more of.
Well, that's okay. I actually came up with a bunch of specific stories that have, to one degree or another, intrigued me.
Sure.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm going to start with the story of Amadou Diallo. He was an immigrant to America from West Africa, and I think this happened. I think maybe 1990 91. He was in the Bronx one day. He reached for his wallet. Some New York cops saw him and thought he was reaching for a gun, apparently because he was a black man, and they shot him down and killed him. You could maybe say classic racism right there, and maybe no, maybe try to get into maybe try to dig into the reasoning behind that, and maybe try to understand that a little bit, and or at least give the story some exposure and make people think how wrong doing something like that is.
Right, especially since it's happened quite a few times in real life.
And and I got this idea from actually a sermon, a story that was told in a sermon by one of my former pastors about the disaster of the Challenger shuttle. Now, maybe you've heard about that. I don't know if you have.
Is that the one that blew up in the atmosphere?
It blew up in the air upon launch. Yeah,
I was about to say, like, not too long after it launched, it didn't even get out of Earth's gravitational pull before it exploded.
it was like it was like just seconds after liftoff, the thing just blew up, and everyone died, pretty much. I think. And so, but what was interesting to me, what I didn't know about it before I heard this story from this pastor, was how there was one engineer. I think he was an engineer at NASA who knew that I guess he knew that the night they planned to launch the thing, it was forecast to be rather cold, and he tried to warn his managers. Now, you try to launch this in a temperature like that, it could end really badly. But for multiple reasons, they ignored that and did it on on the planned time anyway, and sure enough, it ended bad. And then I thought of another historical story, right, which happened even longer ago. The atomic bombing, I think it was during World War II, when it was dropped in Japan. It seems like a lot of people will dismiss that as just a significant groundbreaking for American innovation or something. But something I think is probably not considered or probably downplayed too much is the fact that a bunch of innocent people there in Japan, people who didn't even have anything to do with the threats against our our allied side of the war, they suffered, they got killed in this event. And that can be enough to make me mad.
Oh, understandably, yeah. Like if someone's not involved in a war, they shouldn't be at the receiving end of it.
Then I thought of this is an example that kind of maybe hits close to my environment in a way. The story of a Christian author, or former Christian author, I should probably say, Joshua Harris, who is famous for writing a sort of, I guess you could call it a theology book. I think it was written back like in the late 90s, maybe mid 90s, maybe, I guess, called I Kiss Dating Goodbye, which was sort of, his sort of attempt at a biblically informed manifesto for personal purity, a pure approach to dating, romantic relationships, and it basically suggested a bunch of like more or less specific guidelines for how you should approach those kind of things, based on what Scripture says, according to him anyway. But apparently, now a lot of people, you could say, probably took the advice blindly, and it hurt them more than it helped them. And then more recently, I don't know if you saw this a documentary was made following Harris's reconsideration of what he wrote, called I Survived, I Kissed Dating Goodbye.
Yeah, I can't say I've heard of that one.
Yeah. Well, the book itself I never read. I know my brother did. Apparently, it was mostly hurtful to people, and so more recently, he made this documentary where he reflected on the book's mostly negative impact, and he interviewed a bunch of his readers about how it impacted them, and I think there's probably a good life lesson, like at least for us Christians, from how that blew up. The lesson that you can take what may be biblically informed advice, sort of, from somebody. You still, though, I think want to do your own checking of what scriptures mean. You don't just want to blindly go along with what somebody says it means. Like I've said on this show before.
Yeah, generally with stuff like that, you want to do your own research so you get your own interpretation from it.
And the documentary actually touches a little bit on some experiences, like when he went to the famous True Love Waits conference, how that inspired what he wrote in the book. And I think it would be interesting to dig into that to get an understanding of how the Christian culture around him influenced the way he thought and wrote.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then I wrote about another person that I've mentioned before, Mark Lowry, a former Gaither vocal band singer, and also attended the same college as Vic Mignogna, whom Jordan has met.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's interesting is, I think what probably would make this a good and even inspirational movie was the fact that he grew up with ADHD, and he's done a lot of comedic monologues about growing up with it, and he actually, as far as I know, he holds the record for the longest continuous time as a co-member of the Gaither vocal band. And the fact that he also wrote the lyrics for the song that would become Mary Did You Know.
Oh, that I didn't know. Holy cow.
Yeah. Then I thought about Phil Vischer. I recently, he was the guy who started the VeggieTales franchise. And he wrote a book chronicling his upbringing and his experiences with VeggieTales and how eventually, I don't know how much of the story you know, but what ended up happening at one point was a former distribution partner, actually, if I understand it correctly, sued his company for breach of partnership contract. Even though they didn't do that.
Huh.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know a lot of the behind the scenes stuff with him.
I guess there was maybe some miscommunication or just some false claims about, they gave us these rights, they withheld them, or they didn't let us sell ourselves to this company, stuff like that. And in the end, his company, Big Idea, the company behind VeggieTales, they lost in a landslide, and they pretty much lost all their money, and they had to sell themselves at auction.
Wow.
And so as a result, the whole VeggieTales thing, the whole Big Idea thing, pretty much collapsed. And then Vischer reflects on this. And then probably the refreshing thing about his story is that he came to the conclusion after, reading some theology stuff and doing some searching and questioning. He came to the conclusion, all these years, pretty much all my life I've been trying to please God, doing great and being successful. When really what really mattered was a relationship with him. And it took me all this time to realize that that who I am ultimately is not what I do.
I give him a lot of respect for that then.
And then I put down Chuck Colson, who was, I believe, the founder of an organization that I've donated to, Prison Fellowship, that kind of works to spiritually reach out to people behind bars. And perhaps the most interesting thing is Colson was one of President Nixon's co-conspirators in the Watergate scandal.
Oh.
And he got busted, and he was jailed for it. But while he was in jail, he found a faith in Jesus, and then pretty much the prison fellowship thing came along, and it's like that's a kind of story that most people probably have never heard about. Someone who was part of one of the most infamous conspiracies, one of the most disgraceful acts, and they completely turn over.
Goes to show that anyone can change at any point.
Yes. And the final one I listed was the biblical story of Jonathan and David. Now, if someone were to make like a feature on it, I think that would be cool. Because if you know the story, Jonathan's dad, Saul, is jealous of David. He wants to maintain his own glory and kill David to get him out of the way. Even though Jonathan is Saul's son, he's not playing the tribalist or loyal to the family no matter what card. He has a strong conviction about what's right and what's fair, and he chooses that over no matter what family loyalty, and looks out for David.
Right. I do remember that story.
So that's all I had for those questions, and so I thought, this might be a recurring thing on the show where we play a game, and today I thought we'd try a little something. Today, a game that I made up myself called Ridiculous Recall. And so here's how it works. One of us is going to have a list of three choices of random words generated by a random word generator that I'm going to pull up online. And no, well, whose ever turn it is going to pick one of them, and they'll have to try to list a bunch of movies and or songs um, that have that word in it, and they can also try to mention movies and or songs that include a quote or line with the same word in it. And one more thing, if you can correct your opponent on the exact words, then you will get 3 points for that. I was thinking we do just one round each.
Okay, so each of us gets one word.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just put a. I've got a list of three right here. Why don't I just give you a list? All right. All right. Okay. Okay. I've got three. All right. All right. So, model, tendency, or provoke. Which one you want?
I'll try provoke.
All right. All right. Go ahead.
Let's see, a movie, a song.
All right, and it can be a title, it could be a quote, or a lyric. Any of those.
See, I can think of a lot of films or songs where somebody gets provoked, but actually coming up with a film, song title, or lyric or quote that actually has that word in it, that's actually a challenge. I feel like I should have something.
Yeah.
Man, that's hard.
Yeah. You know what? You know what? I'm going to maybe try to give you a list of shorter words. See if you do better then. Yeah. Right. You know what? I'm gonna try and pull it up here on my phone instead of my computer. Okay. All right. How about this? Ash, stage, or nose?
How do you? Which spelling of nose?
Nose.
Okay, this one I might be able to do better with. And it was nose, and what were the other two?
Stage or ash?
Okay. With the word nose, I feel like there was at least one or two songs that I'm blanking on her name. Julie Andrews. I don't remember if it was
Okay.
Mary Poppins, but I feel like there was a song she sang that somehow involved something being on the tip of your nose.
You should probably know this. You were in Mary Poppins.
Yeah, that was also a few years ago when I did it too. Um, I I remember I don't know if this counts, but it was a parody that somebody made based off of a show that had a quote in it that involved the word nose. But again, I don't know if that counts because it's not a movie or a song.
It's not a quote or a lyric.
Well, it is a quote, but it's not from a movie or song, so I don't know if it would count. And the the setup is that it was a parody of the Dragon Ball Z series called Dragon Ball Z Abridged. And in this parody, there's a fight going on where a guy gets hit in the nose, and the villain is like, "Oh, was that your nose? That was your nose." Because he was kind of taunting him as he was doing it.
All right, so you don't think that counts?
I mean, you specifically were saying movies or songs, so I didn't know if a parody of a TV show would have counted.
Yeah, no.
All right, so remind me one more time what the other two words were.
All right. Ash and stage.
I mean, if you count Pokemon, the main character of a lot of Pokemon movies, his name is Ash.
I'll count that.
So they definitely have said his name several times. Uh, I think in, was it The Evil Dead that had a character named Ash?
Oh, I'm not familiar with that, but I'll give it to you.
Okay, I know there was a guy that had like a shotgun or something. I think his name was Ash. Oh wait, hold on. I think I got a song lyric. Hang on, I got to remember exactly how it goes.
All right, all right.
Okay, so there's a song by Less Friction called "Louder Than Words," and there's a lyric near the beginning where they go, "It was all reduced to rubble, and then again to ash."
All right, that's three.
Right? See if I can at least get one more. I don't remember where this is from, but I remember somebody saying something that goes something like "ashes to ashes."
All right, we'll count that one.
Okay, I don't remember where it's from, but I do remember somebody saying it like that. It's like ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Something along that line. That's probably all I'm gonna get in this amount of time, at least for right now.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, all right.
You think you're gonna stop now?
For right now, yeah.
Okay, all right. Why don't you give me a list? All right.
Okay, I got three here for you.
Okay.
Spelled FEIGN, sunrise, and smart.
I am going to go with smart.
Okay.
All right. So, I thought of Get Smart, which is a movie, though it is based on a TV show, but still a movie. All right.
All right.
Let's
Let's
see.
see.
All right. Lyric from Haley Steinfeld's Most Girls. Most girls are smart and strong and beautiful. There's one. All right. Okay. Let's see now. Uh, All right. All of Me, John Legend. What would I do without your smart mouth? There you go.
There you go.
Oh yeah, very good, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh, all right. Quote from A Christmas Story. Go on, smart donkey, and do it.
I was thinking that there's bound to be quite a few films out there that use some variation of that.
Okay.
Okay.
See, I can think of at least one movie quote that involves it, but it's not my turn, so I wouldn't. So even if I said it, it
Okay.
wouldn't count as a point for me. So okay, so the quote that I thought of, and again, this is not going to be a point for me because it's not my turn, was from I think it was the first Chronicles of Narnia movie that came out, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where they had. I don't remember if they were actually in Narnia yet, but they were all talking, and Susan was like, "Just trying to be reasonable," and Peter, he goes, "No, you're just trying to be smart, as usual."
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Well, it's been a while since I've seen it, but for some reason that particular quote came into my mind.
Okay, I think I got one. Quote from Cheaper by the Dozen.
Oh,
All
it's been a
right.
while since I've seen that one.
All right. Navy is muscle, gray is smarts.
Huh.
And that's a Hillary Duff quote.
Yeah, I have to go back and see the movie again.
All right, so I think I think I'm good because I think I got enough to win.
Yes, you did. I mean, for the first time we did something like this, I'd say we did pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, maybe dragged a little bit, but I think we did okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and one new potentially recurring segment that I thought up
Yep.
is news that bites and or rocks. And so we could discuss some personal or stuff we've read or heard of that or seen or whatever that bites, meaning it was annoying, irritating, frustrating, saddening, or something,
Mm-hmm.
or news that rocks, which which could be something interesting, exciting, lighting, happy, whatever.
Sure.
Yeah, and I came up with one of each, and so for my news that bites, this comes from actually I was just watching this afternoon. I was watching NFL football, and this
Yeah.
commercial came on during a break for Ram trucks, and uh, and so it said when you serve others, blah 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 blah, you get rewarded. Rewards yourself at the Black Friday sales event, and the serve others get rewarded thing. Uh, I don't think I like that because one thing you shouldn't serve people to get things for yourself. I don't know if that was what they were trying to say, but and secondly, that's not a guarantee if you do something good.
Well, yeah, it's not always what goes around comes around. And honestly, saying the word serve is the part that really kind of concerned me. Because thinking back to when America was known to have slaves, it's like they were serving people, but they certainly didn't all get rewarded.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah. So I thought that bit. Did you have news that bites too?
I mean, I didn't have anything specific written down because I was looking initially at the email that you sent me, not the updated one on the Google document. But there have been several instances recently of people being shot in the local area where we are, in roads that I'm familiar with. I think recently somebody was shot on Lyle Ave or somewhere near there.
And I think
And
someone
that,
was shot on Westridge Road too. I think.
yeah, I think that just happened within the past couple days. Like these stories, for whatever reason, have been picking up recently in frequency, and that alone, I would say, bites.
So just the fact that that's been happening so much.
Yes, and it hits a little harder now because it's in places I'm very familiar with. Like I work just off of West Ridge Road. Like I can see it from where I am.
I also had a piece of news that rocks, I think. I don't
Sure.
know. I don't know the legitimacy of it. I don't know how trustworthy it is, but it does sound cool.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I just read an article today from CNET reporting that Microsoft is sending Microsoft Store gift cards to customers via email.
Huh. Did they say how much they were worth?
Apparently, half of the recipients will get a $100 card,
Okay.
and the others apparently are going to get $10 e-cards.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to think of the legitimacy of this, like you were talking about, because usually if there's an email that somebody gets or some random pop-up that comes out of nowhere that advertises, hey, you could get a gift card for this if you do this. It's like it usually is a bit sketchy and ends up being a scam. So I'm not entirely sure how true this would be, but like you're saying, it does at least sound cool.
Yeah, as it is, I don't plan on touching it or having anything to do with it. But
Right.
but if someone can get something cool out of it, like a cool new game app or something, then
Yeah.
then I'm happy. Either
There you
way.
go.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to do it for this time. And so, thanks everybody for watching, listening. As always, we are on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and Facebook. Keep the questions and comments, whatever, coming. And thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally love to hear from people, whether it be comments or questions or constructive criticism. I just enjoy the interaction with the audience. So if they were to reach out to us, I personally would be happy to respond.
That's going to do it. We'll see you again, and thanks again.
See you soon, everybody.